This is the Yungblud Podcast. Turn up that volume. Happy! Welcome back to my little world. I hope you didn't miss me too much, or should I say our world, because I made this podcast for all of you. For anyone who's new to the podcast, let me tell you a little bit about it. Each week I talk to one of you about the biggest things going on in your life. We are creating a community that's free of judgment, some way you can share your stories and we can celebrate them together. The response to this has been absolutely incredible. The amount of people that reached out again for the second round just blew our minds. Absolutely, I promise you. We were just like, what? Every now and then I also like to get one of my mates on a podcast to talk about stuff they've been going through, what their careers have spanned and what they believe in. Today I got one of the biggest rock stars in the world from one of the biggest bands and one of the nicest guys I've ever met ever. His name's Dan Reynolds. I don't know if you know him, from a little band called Imagine Dragons. Shame they weren't bigger, really. As a musician, he's broken so many records, one of the best-selling songs of all time. But he also struggles with depression and lives through a chronic autoimmune disease. A few years ago, he set up an incredible charity to fight against LGBTQIA+ youth suicide. It's an issue he's so passionate about, having grown up in a Mormon church and watched his friends be shamed for their sexuality. No shame here, as we all know. It can get a little bit heavy, it can get a little bit wild, so Norman's a little bit of strong language, so don't tell your parents. There's so much to talk about with Dan. I can't wait to get into it, man. He's one of the best guys I know. I hope I can be just like him when I grow up. Here we go, Dan Reynolds. Let's go! Danny! Ready, Danny?
Ready, Freddy.
Let's go. I am so excited today because I have a real true friend and a bit of a mentor to me on the podcast. Literally a man who I go to if I have issues with my mental health, a man that I would love to be by the time I grow through this industry. It's Dan Reynolds from Imagine Dragons. How are you, man?
Oh, I love you. I love you. I'm so happy to be here, and thank you. That's very kind of you. I aspire to be like you.
Dude, I'm buzzing to speak to you. I just think, like, as I say, you are such an activist across all platforms for so many people, and someone I relate to as like a fan, not just as like a peer. And I think this is going to really help a lot of people. It's been so mind-blowing how many people this podcast has reached. And since the beginning, I've literally been like, I need to get down on this. And I'm so happy we're finally doing it.
Well, from the second that my manager told me that about what you were doing, and I didn't even know it. I mean, we text here and there, but I had no idea that you were just killing it in everything. And I've always, I mean, I am so proud to know you, proud of everything that you do. And so it's just funny to me that you're like, I aspire. I'm like, come on, Dom. Everybody in this industry needs to be more like Dom. Everything that you represent is so powerful and needed for the youth and for the old people too. Probably more so for the old folks.
I love that, man. So I'm just going to dive in because you are such an advocate for like mental health and kind of mental health within men. I found it so hard to talk about mental health, and I remember hearing Night Visions for the first time and kind of feeling that explosion. I think I was like 16. I just finished high school, and I remember I moved down to London, and I was really struggling, kind of opening up. And that album was such an explosive experience. It made me feel like I could do anything. You know what I mean? What was like the first time you kind of acknowledged that your mental health wasn't good?
I started dealing with serious depression in my teenage years. So early teenage years, I started to feel like, why does it seem like everyone's happier than me? And I was very good at putting on the front of, a smile, but inside I was just like, it also came from, I was like going through a religious crisis. I was raised in a very religious home, and it just wasn't for me. It never fit right for me. And that's where I started to feel it. But I didn't talk about it until, I want to say, a year or two into the band, because I was ashamed. I thought it made me look weak to say I had a therapist, which I had for many years previous to that.
Dude, it's so interesting, isn't it? It's just like, I felt exactly the same way. I was raised in like a place where therapy and asking for help was, you just didn't do that. It was just like, stiff up a lip, get on with it, have a cup of tea, and you'll be able to face it. And it's so important to kind of stress that talking about what is going on in your head, good or bad, is so important. Even talking to someone about the good is so brilliant, because then you realize within yourself, you're like, oh, 50% of my thoughts are beautiful, and I'm not just this dark creature that I think I am. And I think, as I say, for you, like growing up Mormon and growing up religious, I bet that was like an intense amount of pressure on your brain with the ideologies that like religion and everything, all those concepts were placing on your head.
And religion works for some people, for sure. I have family members, actually my entire family is still super religious, every one of them. Yeah. And it seems like they're happy and it works for them. But for me, it gave me a constant sense of guilt. So I always felt like I needed to be perfect, and I wasn't. And so then I always felt like God was like giving up on me or something. And I would pray, and I didn't feel like I was receiving answers. I didn't hear a voice, and people would say, well, it's a small voice that you feel in your heart. And I'm like, well, is that just my head that I'm hearing? Or like, so it didn't work for me. And it made me feel dirty because I wasn't abiding by all the laws of Mormonism. And so then I felt like hell was, my future. And that was a super scary thought for a young teenager,
That is crazy. I mean, just for being who you are. I think, especially for me, kind of, again, relating to what you just said there, like, it was the same thing. I thought my future was going to be filled with loneliness and guilt. I thought, like, I wasn't going to get a proper job, in inverted commas. In my head, I was pansexual, and I couldn't figure it out, and I didn't figure that out till recently, 2 years ago, And I just think there had to be an answer, and it freaked me out. I was like, why does there have to be an answer? Why do I have to know what I'm going to do now? Why do I have to know what sexuality I am? Why do I have to know what I'm going to have for dinner tonight? Why do I have to plan 4 days in advance what I'm going to do? I just wanted to exist and be, and I think it was music, and it was kind of that gave me that freedom. Was it Dragons that kind of gave you that confidence? Was there a switch when you met the band you became successful with?
The crazy thing to me is I think where things started to click were as you get older, you just start to think, well, look at the world. Like, for instance, we have just started to figure out electricity. We've just started to, we don't even understand everything when it comes to energy and matter and all these things and the universe. No question. We know nothing.
No.
So, but the crazy thing is all our elders are telling us, well, we have answers, right? Like, fit in this box. Here's the box. Here's sexuality, man, woman, like, here are all these things, but why would we expect them to know answers when we don't even know anything about the universe? We don't know why we're here. Nobody really knows anything. And so, but then we're told to conform to this man-made tiny box that's like, here's a little box of things that we've learned, and then abide by it and feel guilty if you don't. Like, it's so just as far as whether it was the band or anything, it just was like reading, education, conversation, having critical thinking, like thinking, okay, this doesn't add up. Why am I being taught this? And then, as you get older, you just start to see that every man-made box is flawed and wrong because it's made by people who just don't know. And not all of them are bad. Like, not all religion comes from someone with ill intent. I don't believe that everything in religion is always from ill intent. I think sometimes, for sure, a lot of people were power hungry and wanted to control people and manipulate people. But I think also some people were like, I want to give good truth to people, and this has worked for me. And so maybe I'm going to elaborate a little bit on this thing that I don't know about. And then your kid's going to think that it's the truth,
That's what I'm saying. It's like a lot of it's like Chinese whispers. You know what I'm saying? Someone says one thing, then it goes and goes and goes and goes and goes and goes and goes, and then it becomes this ideology that we abide our lives to. It started as an idea out of someone's head. It shouldn't have to be a rule book. Moving on to like when you've created the Love Loud Foundation, and I remember seeing all the posters all over. What was that experience like, kind of creating that and then broadcasting it so beautifully to the world?
I think that everybody just has a role, that is kind of laid out in front of you, and things that you can do to advance humanity. Because I truly believe, without getting too much into it, that the oneness of all of us. I do believe that you and I are connected in a way that we don't understand with science and physics hasn't caught up to it yet. But I truly believe that a part of me is Dom. A part of me is the people who are listening right now. We're connected in some way that is not just hokey, like psychedelic talk. Like I actually believe there's science to this, that we don't fully understand how energy interacts and how we all are connected. Completely. But because of that, I'm just filling my space that I'm in. And my space has been, I was raised in a religious home. A lot of my friends growing up were gay. And growing up with LGBTQ friends, I understood on no level what they had to go through. Zero level. Because I grew up a white heterosexual man who had all this privilege afforded to me. But just being around it, being around the interactions and seeing them have to go to a bishop and say, these are the things I've done, and then to be shamed and told they're sinful. From a young age, I immediately knew that was wrong. Any kid knows. Kids know. Like I can ask my little kids, they already know right and wrong, and that's not good. Shaming someone for who they are, and telling them who they should be, who they should love, the most sacred thing of all, which is the ability to love who you should love and love how you want to love. For anyone to manipulate that or shame is wrong. So I it's taken little effort for me. I could do so much more. And I just am just trying to use my privilege to reach out to anybody I can and say, hey, let's change the future and make it a safer place for our youth. And as simple as that.
Dude, I love it. I think even for me, kind of, who was very confused and very conflicted my whole life, to like hear those words and to hear that message is insane. And as I say again, like I always stress, if you are out there and you are struggling and you are just scared about existing in who you are and loving who you want to love, that is your right and your right alone. And never let anybody out there put you down for that. Never let anybody shame you for that, because it is beautiful and it is sacred and it is honest, and that's all you can be. I'm sending mad love to you out there. If you are feeling like that, you don't need to. This story, man, moving on to this story, like it's the most Dan thing ever. Like when you found out you had an autoimmune disease, you announced it on stage in Leeds. It was kind of amazing that you almost like told your fans first. I relate to that so heavy. That is like such a me thing. If I like anything big happens in my life, I will announce it on stage. I will announce it on the internet. It's like the relationship I have. I think that's so sick. What was that like? Why did you choose to announce your autoimmune disease to 13,000 people?
It's funny, and it actually relates back to what we were talking about in the beginning, which is talking about mental health, which is there's a very dangerous notion that has been taught by our elders, which is when someone is saying, like, I'm dealing with mental health or I'm dealing with this, they're just pandering. They're looking for someone they just want attention, right? That's the most dangerous thing that I believe, one of the most dangerous thing that we are telling our youth, which is, oh, someone's just crying for attention when they talk about being depressed. That's bullshit.
Yeah.
That's just, anybody who's ever told you that, just throw it out the window. Because that's what stops people from talking about these things. It's so important that we share our truth, that we're sharing our hardest parts of life. We're here and then we're gone like this. In the past 5 years, I have lost 4 very close people to me, one of which I was in the room with when they passed. Seeing someone be here and then gone puts everything in perspective. It suddenly just it makes you realize the finality of life. We are finite. I hope, I don't know this, but I hope that we continue on. I believe it. I believe somewhat in my heart that something continues. I don't think it's this heaven thing that I've been taught, but I think that because we're all connected and like there is something that we don't understand that happens after death. But that being said, I don't know that. And so that makes me want to live ferociously. That's why I love people like you. I'm always drawn to people who live ferociously. It's very evident when someone's super passionate and they just are like, zero excuses. I'm not perfect. I got all kinds of flaws. Let me show you all my flaws. Let me tell you my best thing. I'm excited to tell you about it. Those are the people I trust. I don't trust people who aren't expressing those things because it just feels like, I don't know. I'm drawn to people that I feel like are just naked. Their truth is just naked. So it's like word vomit. It was just word vomit. I didn't walk on stage thinking, I'm going to talk about this tonight. I never do that. I never think about what I'm going to say on stage. Yeah. Just say it. And so it was just that. I just felt like I need to say this. I got to express this right now because it makes me feel empowered to say, fuck this disease. You don't own me. I'm not afraid of you. You're not going to dictate my life. And I'm going to do that by saying it right now. I want to say it right now. Okay, said it. And it did that. It did empower me. And it empowers me every day to talk about it. It helps me to know that I'm not afraid of it. It doesn't define me and it doesn't make me weak.
Dude, I love that. That is just so important. Again, if you are out there and going through anything like that, you can beat it. You can be bigger than it. Own it. Own your flaws. Own your brilliance, because each and every one of you out there is simply beautiful and individual just by existing. If you are scared or you are frightened or you are going through things, you don't need to, because you're just, like, I believe in you. Dan from Imagine Dragons believes in you, and it's rock and roll. Dan, you've been incredible today. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Honestly, like, I hope I can just have a career like you and help as many people as you have. Like, I love you, man.
I love you too. I love you, Dom, and I'm so proud to know you. And you know, when I wake up every day with my 4 kids, I want them to aspire to be like you. Like people who are sharing their truth, that are showing love, that aren't ashamed. That's rock and roll, for the record. Like, you want to know what rock and roll is? Rock and roll is not a sound. For me, rock and roll is not necessarily a guitar. Rock and roll, for me, what it means to me is living your truth and sharing it, exposing all the vulnerability of you and being honest. Honesty is rock and roll. That's at its core. Anyway, I love you, and I'm grateful to be here. So thanks for having me. Keep doing you.
You're a rock and roll star, Dan. Love you, man. What a guy. I hope you guys loved that. I loved that. I learned so much from that. It's actually kind of getting me a little bit emotional. If you are struggling out there with mental health, do not suffer alone. Speak to someone. You can get more information by searching online for BBC Action Line. We're back now with loads and loads more episodes. Yes! In each one, I'll be shouting about the things that need to be out there. And I want you to help me get the message out. I want each of you right now to pick up your phone and text 10 people and tell people that you've been listening to this podcast and what it was about. If each of you get one new person to listen to this podcast, we can reach so many more people and hear so many more stories. That is the goal. I love today. Thank you so much. I'll see you next week. Be good.